Hello, welcome to my first video that I'm going to be doing on the wage gap. So first, let me explain to you what the wage gap is. So the wage gap, defined by infoplease.com, is a statistical indicator often used as an index of the status of women's earnings relative to men's. It is also used to compare the earnings of other races and ethnicities to those of white males, a group generally not subject to race or sex-based discrimination. So, if you have not been introduced to this subject before, basically a bunch of women's rights activists, feminists, and just generally social justice warriors, term coined for that group, are going around saying that women are being paid the number ranges depending on who you ask. The biggest number that has been thrown around is a woman makes 70 cents for every dollar a man makes, but it has also gone up to, I've seen, like 89, and that inconsistency by itself already kind of makes me skeptical of the entire thing there. So I have read some studies and things and watched a lot of videos on YouTube from some great YouTubers who've made videos similar to this, and the majority of them that aren't social justice warriors, many of them skeptics, will say that it is false. And there are many reasons to explain why this is false. Women are not paid 77 cents for every dollar that a man makes when they are working the same job, the same amount of hours, at the same quality of work. And that is the honest truth that most people do not, well, I say most people, but the majority of feminist and social justice warrior types of people do not understand. And for good reason. Even President Obama has gone around saying that women make 77 cents for every dollar that a man makes in the same job, and that is not true. That is completely and utterly false. So where the 77 cents or the 89-cent statistics come from is taking the total earnings, I say earnings, not wage, the earnings of all females of a certain year or a certain number of years or months or whatever, and then they take the same number from the men's side, so the amount of earnings from men that year or that span of time, and then they compare them. And yes, men earn between 23 and 11% more than women do on an average, and this is due to many logical reasons that make sense. The entirety of the earnings gap is due to choices women and men make in their careers and jobs, not gender discrimination. So the reason why this gap in earnings exists, as you might assume, is due to personal choices from men and women. The biggest reason being that men tend to choose higher paying fields of careers such as STEM fields and things like that, while women tend to choose more things like teaching and gender studies, which has become very popular recently. And as you might assume, a aerospace engineer will make a significant amount more on average than a teacher of gender studies or something similar. Taking that into account, the wage gap is probably starting to make sense to you. And a lot of people claim still that this is a result of sexism. And sexism on a systematic scale, the patriarchy, as some people like to call it. Feminists and social justice warriors claim that women, especially women with children, are discriminated against when going into careers and finding jobs. They say that women cannot find a full-time job that affords them any kind of flexibility in those fields. Well, you have to look at it from the perspective of the business. Companies should not have to compromise hours when they could easily hire a candidate who can do better hours with just as much experience as this person. If imagine you're a company, you have two candidates. One of them is like, oh, okay, I need really flexible hours because of my children, blah, blah, blah. And then another candidate who's like, oh, I can work pretty much, my schedule's pretty free, I can do whatever. Who are you gonna hire? Honestly, regardless of gender, it's not a gender issue. It's an issue of being able to work X number of hours and needing X number of hours off, etc. And another claim is women face a motherhood penalty and are less likely to be hired for jobs once they have children. Well, of course. I mean, similar to the point I just made, it is common that a mother will have to take care of their children when they're sick and thus stay home from work to do such things. That makes them less reliable and less likely to be hired. And I'd like to remind everyone that, I mean, women can choose not to have children. And there have been studies that have been done that women in between the ages of, I think, 20 and 30 that are not married tend to actually earn on average 8% more than men. So just a little thing to think about. Professor Golden from Harvard has some very good opinions on this whole thing. She's come to the conclusion that most, if not all, of the gap is due to choices women and men make in their careers and jobs, not gender discrimination, as I and many others have already said. After Obama claimed that women earn 77 cents to the dollar that men earn, she asked, does that mean men and women are receiving lower pay for equal work? The response was, that is possibly the case in certain places, but by and large, it is not that. It is something else. The something else in that statement is choice. The free choice that first and second wave feminists fought for. This means the hours they work, the time they take off, and the actual career field. She was asked about evidence that discrimination plays a role in the gap, which she responded that a smoking gun no longer exists. I can quote her in saying, "It is hard to find smoking guns, okay? The smoking guns existed in the past. I have found many a smoking gun where you find actual evidence of firms saying, for example, I do not hire Negroes, or I do not hire women. I mean, you actually find these in 1939. Golden suggests also that the old claim that men are just better at bargaining does not contribute much to the gap. She says that studies have shown men and women show up to a job straight out of college, meaning that they have the same education level, earn the same amount. Golden says that women opt for more flexible hours, and generally, jobs with more flexible hours just have lower wages than jobs without. That's just the truth of the matter. This brings me to my next subject, which is the Fair Pay Act in California. The Fair Pay Act is defined as an act that will prohibit employers from paying men and women different wages for substantially similar work. At first glance, this just sounds like the basic federal laws against paying women different wages for the same work. However, there is a very important piece of the puzzle that many people will glance over. Substantially similar work is not the same work. That is like comparing a Squier Stratocaster guitar to a Gibson Les Paul and saying they're the same thing. Sure, they're both electric guitars with 6 strings, but they have many small differences that cause one to be about 2,000 more than the other on average. It gets worse when you look at the specific factors that they take out when looking at substantially similar work. These include but are not limited to hours worked, whether you are married, whether you have children, quality of work, and even career choice. Are you kidding me? Career choice. The thing that the wage gap debunkers have been talking about for literally years has been completely taken out of the picture. I'll start off by talking about taking out hours worked. Full-time is technically anything more than 35 hours. According to the BLS, men on average work more hours than women. This practically means that if a woman is working 35 hours a week and a man is working 45 in the same job, that they will be paid the same amount. Moving on to career choice, I mean, many studies have shown that women tend to flock towards lower paying majors while men do the opposite. And taking career choice out of the picture when you're trying to look at how much people are getting paid is just completely and utterly mind-blowing to me. I don't even need to tell you how crazy that just by definition is. And if I do, this is not the video for you. Whether you're married and whether you have children, I mean, these can be very important factors when calculating a gap between the pay of two individuals. For example, a woman with children will most likely work less hours overall due to the children needing things such as care when sick, and marriage, I mean, is a lot less of an issue, and I think that's fine to be factored out personally. When it comes to quality of work, this is more of an understandable factor to leave out, as in most cases, quality of job is a very subjective thing and could possibly be biased. However, if it can be proved that a certain employee has done an objectively better job than another, it should not be left out. It is an undeniable fact that there is a variation in quality of work between people, and I'm not talking about genders, races, etc. And I think there are a lot of unintended consequences of this bill. I think it could in turn cause the employment of women, especially women with children, to decline. This is because while they could hire the woman with 2 children that would most likely work less hours than the man, why wouldn't you hire the man that could work more hours when you would end up paying them the same amount? Thank you for tuning in to listen to my rambling for a good few minutes, and I hope I have helped educate you on the subject of the earnings/wage/pay gap that feminists and social justice warriors have been going on about for a good while now. I hope you have a good day, and remember, the patriarchy isn't real.